The year was 9 AD, and the expansive might of the Roman Empire stretched from the shores of the Atlantic to the sands of the Middle East. Amid the political complexities of the imperial capital, where marble columns and bustling forums symbolized its grandeur, there was a continued push to solidify Rome's presence along the Rhine River. The provinces of Gaul were firmly in Roman hands, yet the lands eastward, occupied by a myriad of Germanic tribes, remained unruly and only partially subdued. Roman strategists had long aimed to extend the empire's borders to the Elbe River, thus securing a natural frontier and broadening their territorial control. These Germanic territories, collectively referred to by Rome as Germania Magna, were home to tribes such as the Cherusci, the Marsi, the Chatti, and many others who shared linguistic and cultural bonds, but often fought among themselves. Still, Roman influence had been growing there. Under Emperor Augustus, several legions had marched across the Rhine, establishing fortifications and introducing Roman governance. The empire's ambition was to incorporate these lands into a province, bridging any gaps between the Gallic regions and deeper Germanic territories. Many tribal leaders found it strategically advantageous to cooperate with the Romans. The empire promised trade benefits, access to precious metals, and a chance to harness Roman expertise in engineering and agriculture. Indeed, over the decades, a delicate balance was struck. Roman legions sometimes clashed with the tribes in bloody skirmishes, yet they also built roads, trading posts, and frontier towns that brought a semblance of stability. By 7 AD, Publius Quinctilius Varus, an experienced politician and administrator, had been appointed governor of this nascent Roman province east of the Rhine. Varus was reputed for his role in handling provincial affairs in Syria, and Emperor Augustus believed that his calm temperament and administrative skill would be key to pacifying Germania. Yet, the situation in the region was far more precarious than it seemed to Rome's leadership. Beneath the thin veneer of Romanization lay a proud people who resented ongoing demands for tribute, disliked the Roman legal systems that conflicted with their own customs, and yearned to preserve their ancestral traditions. As Varus commenced his governance, he implemented the Roman tax structure and legal codes, hoping to integrate the tribes into a well-organized province. Among the new Roman allies was a Cheruscan nobleman named Arminius, who had spent part of his youth as a hostage in Rome and served in the Roman military. He had gained Roman citizenship and the rank of equestrian. Tall, resolute, and driven by a cunning intellect, Arminius returned to his homeland ostensibly to help Varus maintain order. To Varus and many other Roman officers, Arminius symbolized the success of Rome's plan to civilize Germania, a tribal prince turned loyal Roman commander, bridging the gulf between empire and frontier. Yet beneath Arminius's polished exterior smoldered an ambition that outgrew any loyalty to Rome. He had observed Roman tactics, learned their strategies, and understood their command structures. All of this knowledge, he would one day turn against them. Over the course of 2 years, Varus moved systematically to integrate the region. He stationed 3 legions, Legions 17, 8, and 19, in the territory, supported by cavalry and auxiliary units. A network of small forts dotted the countryside, and roads were carved through dense forests and marshy lowlands. Summer campaigns typically involved quelling local uprisings, and the presence of Roman troops often dissuaded smaller tribes from rebelling. Varus believed that the assimilation process was on track. Taxes were being collected, tribal leaders were sending hostages to assure their loyalty, and Roman law was being slowly introduced. However, these outward signs of pacification masked deeper unrest. The abrupt imposition of tribute and the forced acceptance of Roman legal proceedings chafed at local customs. Disputes that were once settled through tribal assemblies or by the sword now had to be navigated under Roman edict, administered by officials who cared little for local norms. Arminius seized on this growing resentment, forging secret alliances among the disenchanted tribal chieftains. Carrying with him the prestige of Roman training, he moved stealthily among tribes, persuading them that the time was ripe for a grand rebellion to push the Roman legions out of their lands. This secret network spanned the Cherusci, the Bructeri, and other tribes, each clan bitter over Roman intrusion. During the late summer of 9 AD, Arminius approached Varus, informing him of a brewing revolt in the north. Although details were murky, Arminius insisted that multiple tribes were planning to attack Roman settlements, and he urged Varus to lead the legions personally to quell the disturbance. Varus, respectful of Arminius's counsel and aware that his own reputation hinged on maintaining stability, agreed. It seemed a straightforward matter. Roman discipline and force of arms would swiftly pacify a localized rebellion. Yet certain advisors cautioned Varus to be wary. Chief among them was Segestes, another Cheruscan nobleman who distrusted Arminius and suspected treachery. Varus, however, dismissed Segestes' warnings, unable to imagine that the man he deemed his friend and a Roman officer would betray him. So began the ill-fated march into the Teutoburg Forest. Varus's forces were sizable, nearly 3 full legions, plus auxiliaries, camp followers, merchants, and families. The total number of personnel in this moving column might have numbered as high as 20,000. The route passed through thick woodlands and treacherous marshes where roads were often little more than narrow tracks. The Romans marched in an extended column, weighed down by wagons and baggage, slowing their progress to a crawl. Meanwhile, Arminius and allied Germanic leaders prepared the perfect ambush. The tribes set about constructing traps and earthworks. They leveraged the natural topography, a chain of forested hills and narrow passes, to funnel the Roman column into confined spaces where their usual disciplined formations would be impossible to maintain. Native to these woods, the Germanic warriors knew every path, every clearing, and every hidden vantage point. They placed sharpened stakes hidden in ditches and brush, arranged fallen trees to block escape routes, and stationed archers and spearmen in concealed positions. The stage was set for an assault that would exploit Roman vulnerabilities and the terrain's complexities. In the early morning of the first ambush day, a sudden downpour worsened conditions drastically. The damp clay underfoot turned slippery, and the legionaries found it difficult to maintain formation. Visibility was poor, and a dense fog clung to the ancient trunks of the forest. Rumbling thunder seemed to echo from all directions, creating a tense atmosphere that frayed nerves. Then, without warning, war horns blasted from the shadows, unleashing a chorus of savage war cries. Arminius and his allies struck with terrifying ferocity. Caught between steep hillsides and marshy ground, the Roman column was stretched out and disorganized. Legionaries, famed for their discipline in open-field battles, struggled to maneuver their heavy shields and javelins in tight quarters. Baggage wagons became entangled with each other, and panicked animals bucked in terror. Tribal warriors rushed out of concealed ditches and forest hollows, hurling spears and brandishing swords. The screaming of wounded men rose to the heavens as the well-timed ambush disintegrated Roman order. Varus tried to rally his troops, but communication was nearly impossible. Outriders found it difficult to navigate the chaos, and many officers were cut down before they could relay commands. By the time the Roman forces established a semblance of a defensive posture, casualties were already mounting. The drizzle turned into a pelting rain, soaking the legionaries' equipment and making their once invincible scutum shields heavier. Meanwhile, the Germanic tribes retreated into the undergrowth, emerging in small raiding parties to strike wherever the line was weakest. The Romans found no relief at day's end. They attempted to build a fortified camp, but morale was low. Supplies were running short, and some soldiers were separated from the main body, lost or captured. Throughout the night, the howls of the tribes and the muffled groans of the wounded filled the dark. On the second day, Varus and his senior officers recognized they had to break out of the forest and regroup at a more defensible location, possibly near the Rhine or one of the Roman forts. Yet, the route was no easier. The storm, having passed during the night, left behind sodden terrain that turned every step into a monumental effort. The Roman column marched on, desperate to find an open field where they could employ classic legion tactics. However, the tribes were in full control of the forests. Arminius used deception effectively. He would appear at certain points, giving the illusion of a major push, only to vanish once the Romans rushed troops in that direction. This misdirection allowed other tribesmen to strike an undefended portion of the line. Time and again, the Romans were forced into smaller engagements that chipped away at their numbers. Unfamiliar with the labyrinthine forest paths, they ended up in traps. Morale plummeted as wounded men died for lack of medical aid, and the normal logistical order of the legions collapsed. Food ran low, water was hard to come by, and the pounding sense of dread infected even veteran centurions. Arminius, meanwhile, encouraged the tribes to maintain constant pressure. He reminded them that a Roman victory would mean renewed subjugation, while a concerted Germanic triumph would preserve their lands and freedom. His leadership stoked the tribes' resolve, turning an already fierce ambush into a relentless pursuit. On the third day, the battered Roman force approached a narrow defile near a ridge known in local lore. This spot had been meticulously prepared by the Germanic warriors. A series of palisades and earth ramparts lined one side, while swampy terrain on the other side hindered the Roman flanks. Arminius placed archers on elevated ground, giving them a vantage point from which to rain arrows onto the exposed Roman line. Trapped yet again, the legions attempted to form a defensive testudo, interlocking their shields overhead. But the confusion and limited space made such formations difficult to hold. Arrows and javelins found their targets with grim efficiency. Some Romans attempted to charge the ramparts, but they were met with a volley of spears and clubs, driving them back in panic. It was in this maelstrom that Varus, realizing the battle's hopelessness, reportedly fell on his sword rather than be captured. Other high-ranking officers, once proud of their Roman discipline and decorated for their years of service, faced a similar choice: fight to the bitter end or take their own lives to avoid the horror of captivity. For the average legionary, the possibility of survival vanished quickly. Some scattered into the woods in a desperate bid for escape, but the tribes knew the terrain intimately and hunted them down. Others attempted to surrender, yet no mercy was extended. So deep was the hatred for Rome's occupation that the captured were often sacrificed or enslaved. When the final pockets of Roman resistance collapsed, the Teutoburg Forest fell silent save for the cries of the victors and the anguished groans of the few surviving legionaries. The forest floor was littered with Roman arms and armor, broken shields, bent swords, and the twisted remains of wagons stood as a testament to the scale of the catastrophe. The tribes had destroyed 3 entire Roman legions, auxiliaries included. Such a feat seemed impossible to the wider empire, which had often regarded these Germanic warriors as uncivilized barbarians, incapable of uniting effectively. But under Arminius's leadership, the tribes showed their capacity to coordinate and exploit Rome's weaknesses. In the days that followed, the triumphant warriors turned to rituals of victory, erecting altars where they sacrificed Roman captives and offered spoils to their gods. The swirling smoke of funeral pyres rose above the treetops. Arminius's name became legendary among the tribes, and he was hailed as the liberator of Germania. He had demonstrated that Rome could be defeated on its own terms, through strategy, deception, and a calculated use of the local terrain. Countless legionary eagles, the prized standards of the Roman army, were captured or lost in those dank woods. Symbols of Roman might, once revered throughout the empire, now lay shattered or enshrined in tribal communities as trophies. The impact on Rome was seismic. In the imperial court, the news of the defeat arrived slowly, carried by panicked messengers who had survived only by fleeing early. When Emperor Augustus learned that 3 entire legions had been wiped out, the legend goes that he roamed the palace at night, crying, "Varus, give me back my legions!" The public outcry was tremendous, and the shock reverberated across all Roman provinces. Recruitment centers scrambled to raise new legions, but the blow to imperial pride was incalculable. With a frontier now dangerously exposed, Rome had to reconsider its expansion policy. No longer would the empire vigorously push its border from the Rhine to the Elbe. Instead, the Rhine became the recognized boundary, and subsequent emperors fortified it heavily. In the months and years after the battle, a series of Roman reprisals took place. Germanicus, a capable Roman general and nephew of the emperor, led several punitive expeditions into Germania to recover the lost standards and avenge the slaughter. While Germanicus managed to inflict casualties on the tribes and recover 2 of the lost eagles, he never fully re-established the broad Roman control that Varus had attempted. Logistical challenges, harsh winters, and the memory of Teutoburg's horror made deeper forays tenuous. Roman policy shifted toward fortifying the region with military bases along the Rhine and the Danube, securing what land they could hold rather than risking another cataclysmic defeat in the shadowy depths of the Germanic forests. Arminius's rise to fame did not guarantee a lasting unity among the tribes. Internal disputes, rivalries, and power struggles soon emerged. Segestes, the Cheruscan who had warned Varus, had never supported Arminius and later conspired against him. Different tribal chieftains, once united by a common enemy, returned to their own age-old feuds. Though Arminius remained a hero for orchestrating the monumental victory against Rome, he had to fight several battles against fellow Germanic leaders who feared his growing power. Eventually, he was assassinated by members of his own family. Still, his legacy as the man who destroyed 3 Roman legions in a single campaign outlived him. Teutoburg Forest would remain in Roman and European consciousness as a place of ominous renown. Historians like Tacitus later recounted the horror, describing how Roman soldiers sent by Germanicus years after the disaster found the battlefield strewn with bones and crude altars where their comrades had been sacrificed. These images became symbolic of Rome's vulnerability and the stark divide between so-called civilization and the tribal world. The Roman worldview was shaken by the realization that, despite their engineering prowess, administrative systems, and disciplined legions, they were not invincible in regions that refused to submit. Over the centuries, the memory of Teutoburg Forest echoed through the annals of European history. For German nationalists in the 19th and early 20th centuries, Arminius, often renamed Hermann, became a symbol of freedom and resistance. Grand monuments were erected to commemorate the battle, though many details of the exact location and sequence of events were debated by scholars and archaeologists. It was not until the late 20th century that strong archaeological evidence pointed to Kalkriese as the likely site of the battle, where excavations uncovered Roman coins, weapons, and fortifications that matched historical accounts. Yet the true importance of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest transcends national narratives. On a broader scale, it decisively marked the limit of Roman expansion into Central Europe. Had the legions prevailed, Roman territory might have extended deep into the Germanic heartland, potentially altering the cultural and political landscape of the continent for centuries to come. Instead, the defeat fixed the Rhine as a lasting boundary, creating distinct zones of Latin and Germanic influence that would shape medieval Europe. The empire continued to flourish in many respects, but the humiliating ambush forced it to recognize the futility of overextension. The immediate aftermath for the local tribes was a mixture of euphoria and subsequent trials. Many believed the Roman threat had been permanently vanquished, but Roman retaliation under Tiberius and Germanicus proved that the empire could still project formidable power. Several tribes who had joined Arminius now found themselves targeted. Some decided to settle back into an uneasy coexistence with Rome, trading across the Rhine while maintaining their political independence. Others ventured deeper into the forests, away from potential Roman retribution. Over time, tribal alliances shifted, and the ephemeral unity forged by Arminius gave way to old rivalries. Yet the sense of having achieved the impossible against Rome became a powerful myth that inspired Germanic peoples for generations. To many Roman soldiers stationed at frontier forts in the aftermath, the specter of Teutoburg Forest loomed large. Patrols ventured into the outskirts of the woodlands only cautiously, and new watchtowers were built at strategic intervals. The chatter in legionary camps bristled with tales of cunning barbarians lurking just beyond the tree line, ready to strike. Discipline remained tight, and the Roman emphasis on engineering strong defenses increased. For the empire, it was a lesson in the value of respecting local conditions, forging reliable alliances, and never underestimating the role of terrain in warfare. In the decades that followed, the frontier stabilized, but the memory of Teutoburg acted as a deterrent to any bold expansions. Even the famously aggressive Emperor Caligula, who threatened grand campaigns into Germanic territory, accomplished little beyond ceremonial invasions. As Roman historians reflected on the devastation, they scrutinized Varus's competence, Arminius's cunning, and the sheer brutality of the ambush. Writers like Velleius Paterculus, Cassius Dio, and Tacitus offered various interpretations, but the common thread was the moral lesson that arrogance and complacency could undo even the world's strongest military force. Varus had marched too confidently into unknown territory, trusting alliances too easily, while failing to grasp the depth of local animosity. Arminius exploited that overconfidence to the devastating effect, orchestrating a moment that redefined the balance of power in Europe. From a cultural perspective, the battle also highlighted the clash of civilizations. Romans prided themselves on their polished society, their network of roads, aqueducts, theaters, and forums. They saw the Germanic tribes as savage, if not hopelessly barbaric. Yet, it was precisely the tribes' intimacy with their homeland and their fierce preservation of local autonomy that allowed them to triumph over a more advanced foe. In the grand tapestry of history, Teutoburg Forest became one of many reminders that technological or organizational superiority does not always guarantee victory, especially in environments where local knowledge and strong collective will can level the playing field. In the centuries following the Roman Empire's decline, the significance of Teutoburg Forest waxed and waned in popular memory. During the Holy Roman Empire, the figure of Arminius was referenced as a legendary ancestor, a unifier against external dominion. The 16th and 17th centuries saw renewed scholarly interest as historians and archaeologists attempted to pinpoint the battle's location. National Romanticism during the 19th century in Germany transformed Arminius into a patriotic icon. The construction of the Hermannsdenkmal monument in the Teutoburg Forest region stands as a testament to the enduring cultural resonance of this ancient conflict. However, to reduce the battle to a mere symbol of nationalism is to overlook its broader lessons. The Teutoburg disaster had immediate ramifications for the Roman Empire, shaping its defensive strategies and geopolitical boundaries. It compelled emperors to invest heavily in frontier defenses, culminating in structures like the limes, a system of walls, palisades, and fortifications spanning from the Rhine to the Danube. This concentrated defensive posture allowed Rome to maintain stability within its established borders for centuries, although it also signaled a shift from conquest to consolidation. For historians tracing the trajectory of empires, the defeat stands as a milestone in the recognition that overreach can lead to catastrophic losses. On a more human level, the tragedy underscores the fragility of even the most disciplined army when caught off guard. Many of Varus's soldiers were not raw recruits. They were veterans who had campaigned in multiple theaters. Yet, stripped of their usual formations and thrown into a labyrinth of muddy trails and thick undergrowth, they were reduced to a state of confusion. The unwavering confidence that came from being part of Rome's finest shattered under the hail of javelins and the fury of tribal warriors who knew the land intimately and capitalized on every advantage. Meanwhile, the Germanic tribes, for all their success, soon faced the vacuum of power that can follow such a triumph. Arminius's inability to convert this coalition of tribes into a lasting confederation meant that within a few years, internecine conflicts resumed. Despite their victory, the tribes did not forge a unified Germanic state at that time, leaving the region as a patchwork of tribal domains. Rome, wounded but still potent, found ways to pit one tribe against another, leveraging old feuds to maintain a level of control. The ephemeral nature of tribal unity would persist until much later in European history, underscoring that even a victory so grand could not resolve deep-rooted cultural and political fragmentation. Yet, the essence of Teutoburg Forest remains in collective memory as a cautionary tale. It warns of the dangers of underestimating local resistance, of ignoring intelligence and failing to adapt to unfamiliar terrain, and of allowing pride to mask the possibility of betrayal. For Arminius, it was the apex of his career, the point at which he revealed the strategic brilliance gleaned from his Roman training. For Varus, it was the end, forever marking his name with one of the greatest military disasters Rome ever suffered. And for Emperor Augustus, it was a personal torment that would define the twilight of his reign, reminding him that no matter how extensive the empire grew, unforeseen disasters could undermine it from within. Modern archaeological findings at Kalkriese have unearthed coins stamped with Varus's name, fragments of Roman armor and weaponry, consistent with the early imperial period. These remnants serve as silent witnesses to the chaos of that fateful engagement. The soil reveals evidence of hastily dug trenches and fortifications that appear to match the historical descriptions of the ambush. Layers of charcoal and debris hint at the fiery aftermath, when the tribes likely burned Roman equipment and offered captured standards as trophies to their gods. This physical evidence corroborates the accounts of ancient writers, bridging the gap between legend and reality. Today, visitors can walk through the rolling, wooded terrain of the Kalkriese region and reflect on how a single event shaped the destinies of countless lives and, indeed, the direction of an empire. While the forests are far thinner than they were 2 millennia ago, one can still imagine the stifling gloom of dense trees and the disorienting clamor of tribal horns echoing among the trunks. Exhibits in local museums showcase meticulously preserved relics, arrowheads, spear tips, fragments of chainmail, remnants of an empire's aspiration to conquer all, scattered by an alliance of tribes determined to remain free. In broader world history, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest stands as a turning point. The Roman Empire learned lessons in restraint, acknowledging that some frontiers were simply too costly to push further. The Germanic peoples, though never forging a single empire in the immediate aftermath, demonstrated that even the mightiest war machine could be broken when local knowledge, unity of purpose, and strategic cunning were combined. Over time, this realization influenced the empire's approach to governance in frontier regions across Europe, the Near East, and North Africa. Rather than direct conquest and wholesale assimilation, more emphasis was placed on client kings, buffer states, and alliances that leveraged local power structures. In summation, the events in the Teutoburg Forest during 9 AD constitute one of the most stunning ambushes in military history, resulting in the annihilation of 3 Roman legions and forever curbing Rome's expansionist momentum into Germania. It was a triumph of terrain, unity, and betrayal over hubris, complacency, and inflexible tactics. The ramifications shaped the northern boundary of the Roman Empire, influenced its foreign policy, and, in many respects, set the stage for the emergence of the European landscape in centuries to come. In those damp, dark woodlands, lined with hidden ravines and deceptive paths, the unstoppable tide of Roman conquest ran aground, undone by a man who was once its ally, and tribes determined never again to kneel before distant lords. Even after 2,000 years, the memory of the battle resonates as a powerful lesson on the unpredictability of warfare and the resilience of indigenous peoples when they band together. In the annals of ancient military conflicts, Few episodes rival the intensity and long-term significance of the catastrophe Varus and his legions endured. The Roman eagle, once a symbol of unstoppable power, lost its luster in the heart of Germania, overshadowed by the indomitable spirit of those who chose their freedom over submission. And in that final stand, or rather in that series of cunning ambushes, a new chapter was carved into the world's memory, one that has endured to remind us how quickly the mightiest empire can be brought to its knees, and how the most unassuming of forests can become a graveyard for the proud.